Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. John Steppe joining us here in just a moment. Wanted to let you folks know that we are starting season 4. We ran a repeat last week of legendary Hawkeye quarterback Drew Tate for the first episode back for season 4 here at Hawkeye. We are starting our first live show recorded for season 4. So thanks again for tuning in and making this a success. We greatly appreciate you viewing and responding to us the way you do. So that's the first order of business I wanted to get out of the way and say thanks so much. We've got so much to get to today with John Steppe from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. But I also wanted, before I bring John up, wanted to also thank Craig and Stacy Schrader, as always, with the Fight with Flash Foundation. Fightwithflash.org. Their golf tournament, their annual golf tournament is coming up on Friday, September 8th. So go online again, fightwithflashfoundation.org, and we'll be talking to Craig and Stacy after the fact. They've got so many other great fundraising efforts going on. But let's you and I talk about this Hawkeye football team. Let's talk about Cade McNamara, his injury status. Kirk Ferentz, you had a press availability today. Again, this is Wednesday, August 23rd. Leading up to this first game, we had some NCAA rulings coming down on some, being resolved with some players. Noah Shannon being primarily the main one. But let's let you get into everything that happened today. Let's start there with today's presser with Kirk Ferentz, please, John.
Yeah, a lot happening. It seems like this is the busiest August. It always is a busy time of year, and especially busy when you have the gambling situation, as you were alluding to, and Cade McNamara's injury. I'll start with Cade's injury. That, of course, is going back to the Kids Day open practice. It was during the 11-on-11 portion of practice. Kirk Ferentz saying today that he's hopeful of him potentially returning at the end of this week, which would certainly be excellent news for Hawkeye fans. Of course, every practice that McNamara misses is another opportunity missed in terms of him gelling with this new offense. And even if he's available for week 1, which seems to be promising, not putting anything in stone, but even if he's available for week 1, you'd like to have him back as soon as possible, just because you have new receivers, you have a new quarterback with him, a lot of new pieces, and you'd like to have them have some time together, because McNamara was really limited in the spring as he was recovering from the knee injury. That's the current situation with Cade McNamara. The even bigger thing from today's Kirk Ferentz news conference was the gambling situation, and this is an evolving story. So as Dave, you mentioned, recording this on Wednesday, as of Wednesday, we know that 11 Iowa athletes have received penalties, or as the NCAA called it, determinations regarding the sports gambling investigation. Now, the University of Iowa is saying that they can't give information specifically about players without their consent because of FERPA. But we do know Noah Shannon's status. He has given Kirk Ferentz permission to speak about that. And the NCAA suspension for him is that he is expected to miss this entire season, which obviously is a big blow to this defense. You're talking about a 2-year starter with a lot of experience. You can't replicate that experience. Now they are appealing it, and Kirk made a case today at the news conference. You can see his exact quotes in my articles at thegazette.com, but he made a case for it, and I'm sure the university will make a strong case for why that should be brought down. A lot of Kirk's point is, okay, the world is changing. So in the meantime, as long as this appeal is still ongoing, Noah Shannon still cannot play. If this suspension stands after the appeal, it would essentially be the end of his collegiate career, which I don't think anyone would like to see.
Yeah, that's a huge cog in the wheel right there if that plays off for Noah Shannon. But, John, everybody still has to take a pause, because the biggest conversation in the offseason, and of course last season, was offensive line. And we documented this with you and others on this show regularly last season. A lot of missed blocks, blocking whips, blocking open air and not even hitting players on certain plays. But from what I'm hearing from you and others around this camp, The offensive line is getting the lion's share of the coverage, and most of it positive. John, your thoughts?
Well, I thought at the Kids Day practice, the offensive line probably looked better than past years, but there was no mistaking that the defensive line is the strength. And that's where it's always difficult in terms of evaluating the offensive line at this point in the year, is they're going up against the defensive line, which is really as experienced as any position group on this Iowa team. So they had some difficult moments in the Kids Day practice, but that also is going up against a really good defensive line. I'm really looking forward to that first game against Utah State to just see what happens with a different group. There's certainly a lot of confidence from inside that building about what this offensive line could do in 2023. But will it pan out in terms of games? We'll see in about a week or so. So sounds like there's still a lot in terms of work in progress. Kirk Ferentz still doesn't have his ideal starting five yet, it sounds like. There are a couple of spots that you can pretty much assume. I'd be very surprised to not see Logan Jones starting at center. I'd be very surprised to not see Mason Richmond starting at left tackle. You're probably going to see Rusty Feth somewhere at guard, but really those first two are probably the ones that you can bet on more. And then the other three spots are the ones that are more of moving pieces. But really, as goes this offensive line, probably goes this 2023 team, where if they can block to a level that Iowa fans are used to seeing in past years, before last year, and even the year before then, 2021, this could be a dangerous team. But you really need that blocking up front, and you're asking for a pretty big improvement from them when you look at just how bad things were last year.
Soon. So, John, thanks again for joining us. He is John Steppe, beat writer for the Iowa Hawkeyes athletic programs, and he is with the Cedar Rapids Gazette, the Gazette.com. As John mentioned, you see all his handiwork or all his information at the bottom of the screen, along with mine throughout the show. So, John, let's run to a quick break, and thanks again to you. Viewers, thanks again to you as well. We are into season 4 now of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. So we'll be back with more in just a few moments.
To have a strong finish, you need an excellent start. It's true on the track and also in the field. That's why Mershman Seeds works tirelessly to deliver cutting-edge technology year after year. Introducing Starting Line, Mershman Seeds' latest advancement in seed treatment, now providing added protection from white mold and sudden death syndrome all season. Ask for Starting Line seed treatment from Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. You can see our buddy John Steppe going to be joining us for the whole show. John, a beat writer for Iowa Hawkeye athletics, primarily football. We're talking about today. John with the Gazette.com or the Cedar Rapids Gazette newspaper, and you see all of John's information at the bottom of the screen along with mine throughout this show. And so, John, we just kind of whetted our appetite in that first segment with Hawkeye football. So let's get more into it. I do want to mention leading into this, and we'll talk about this more at the future of the Big Ten and Iowa Hawkeye athletics with Beth Getz later on in this segment and in the third segment. But now there are 18 in the Big Ten, no longer 16. And SC and UCLA haven't even joined yet until next year. And then you've got the addition of Oregon and UW, Washington right now, University of Washington. There. But let's let you get back to football and everything you wanted to cover as far as in the gambling investigation continually and anything else going on in the football program you want to cover, please, John.
Yeah, a few quick other notes on the gambling situation. So we know about Noah Shannon because he is voluntarily given that information, given Kirk Ferentz permission to talk about it. The other players, we know about Aaron Blom, the walk-on backup kicker, and we know about the walk-on wide receiver, Jack Johnson, because they've been cited. There are still a few more athletes we haven't heard of yet, so still stay tuned for more information. This may even break this week, we'll see. But with FERPA, it's kind of a complicating factor in terms of when we'll find that information. So still more could happen with that. Of course, the NCAA investigation is separate from the law enforcement investigation. So important to keep those in mind. Noah Shannon has the suspension then in the NCAA investigation, has not been charged in the criminal investigation. But there's a lot of potential here for this Iowa team. They have a weaker schedule than usual, where you were mentioning Iowa State. That's a team that has really been affected by the sports gambling investigation. You have a tough game on the road at Penn State, but then your other two crossover games against Big Ten East teams are Michigan State and Rutgers, and those are very winnable games. And then you look at the rest of the Big Ten West, and you've got 4 teams with either a first-year head coach or an interim head coach, now with the Northwestern situation. So you have a lot of turmoil in the division, and that really clears an opportunity for Iowa, because you look at a program like Wisconsin, okay, they have a lot of talent this year, but first-year head coaches typically have not done superbly in the Big Ten. Now, there could be a lot going for Iowa, so it's a little bit of a wait and see in terms of offensive line, as we've talked about. I'll be curious to see which wide receivers really step up, considering you have a lot of new pieces. But no matter what, it's going to be an interesting season.
But let's you and I talk about Beth Getz, and I think your most interesting comment to me initially, John, and I want you to go into this on the air. I want to bring it on the air. You said her opening statement was very brief, succinct, and to the point, very matter of fact, and she immediately started taking questions. That's nothing against Gary Barta, but that's definitely right there. Signal number one, as you're nodding with me, that is signal number one, that there is definitely a change in the leadership in the way things are done at the University of Iowa Athletics, John.
Yeah, it's really a new era, and Beth was really impressive with her answers on a wide range of topics, whether it be Brian Ferentz's designated performance objective of 25 points per game. She brings up that she knows that when we asked about it, she mentions that she knows that it's going to be something that people talk about, but she's just focused on cheering on the team, and evaluation will happen at the end of the year. But bigger things than that, 2 comments really in particular stood out to me that really mark a contrast from Gary Barta. One is when she was asked about the future of athletes, the relationship that colleges have with athletes in terms of amateurism and do they become employees, etc. And she really embraced the change that's coming. And that's quite the contrast from Gary Barta, who was advocating against the one-time transfer pretty recently. I believe that was back to last year or the year before, and had a frosty relationship, to say the least, with the NIL collective that's trying to help Iowa compete in this NIL space. So really that stood out to me in terms of how much she was acknowledging the change and saying that college athletics needs to evolve. That stood out. And she was also asked and had a great answer about coming in with some turmoil. And she was an interim AD at Minnesota and was there at a very difficult time. And now, frankly, is here at a difficult time. When you think about the gambling investigation, you think about the lawsuits that have been in Iowa's recent history. It's been a tough time recently for Iowa in some regards. And she talked about, even though she wasn't there for some of those things, being aware of those things, understanding them, and not making repetitive mistakes. And when you think about how many lawsuit settlements there were during Gary Barta's tenure, not having repetitive mistakes is a key thing in terms of Iowa's competitive future, because when you have these $4 million, however many figures, however many zeros we put on the end of the number, it really puts the athletic department in a bind when you're having to pay out these settlements. And of course, beyond just the monetary aspect of it, the goal is to have a good experience for student athletes. So, and not having these situations in the first place. And then there's the Title IX stuff too. You can kind of just go down the list where not making repetitive mistakes is really something that is going to be important. And it kind of showed or implied a listening element of listening to what has happened before to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Those 2 things really stood out to me throughout that press conference.
Astute observations as always by you. And I think I'll go one step farther. I wasn't there, but seeing the presser on video afterwards and talking to you and my production partner, Michael Merrick, about this, and even our buddy Sean Bach from 24/7, who'll be joining us again throughout this year with coverage. The air of that, everything you just said, to me, shows to the fans and the viewers. And that's really, the third point I want to bring up, and this as well, John, it's public perception. And so, yes, you want positive experiences for the coaches, administration, and the athletes, primarily the athletes who are participating. But as fans, it's got to pass the eye test and the smell test, as we say. And yes, you mentioned, it's taxpayer funded university. It's a public university. So these large dollar lawsuits, then you get into the political aspects of this and what people think and say. And then you got a whole other can of worms. I don't want to get into that. We did a lot of that this spring. You and I talked about this stuff. But that to me is the other big test here is, I don't want to say smoothing over, but for lack of a better term, I'll say that just to ease the waters a little bit here. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. And from what I saw and heard from Beth Getz as well, it sure seems to be that way. And you've had extended conversations with her on and off camera. And to me, I just think your vibe really sets it out there for me and says, okay, the ship has been steadied here, it appears. And that's great news, John.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of people who have worked with Beth either currently at Iowa or in the past, whether it be Brad Stevens, now president of the Boston Celtics, who worked with her when they were both at Butler, whether it's Gino Auriemma, who worked with her when she was at UConn. Gino, of course, being the legendary women's basketball coach there, who's won however many national titles. And it's clear that she has gained a lot of respect from past colleagues and current colleagues at Iowa. And I've yet to hear a bad thing about her as a leader. And the fact that even you have somebody like Brad Stevens picking up the phone to talk to a reporter in Iowa really speaks to how much she's built those relationships as well. So she's done little things since coming to Iowa, like when Ragbri was going through Coralville, volunteering to sell ice for the Coralville Ragbri committee. Little things that typically you don't see a Power 5 athletic director willing to do in terms of getting their hands dirty, being really hands-on. She's willing to do in terms of really building those relationships, whether that be with coaches, whether that be with athletes. I've heard from coaches who've really appreciated her background as a former coach. She really has a background of a little bit of everything. She's a former athlete in terms of playing soccer, former soccer coach, then administrator at various levels throughout athletic departments across the country, including as an interim AD at Minnesota and as a permanent AD at Ball State. And now she's here and kind of able to meld all of those things together. Of course, some big challenges when you're looking at Big Ten expansion, when you're looking at the future of college athletics, when you're looking at kind of picking up the pieces from the gambling investigations. I say investigations plural because of the NCAA and law enforcement. But she really has impressed a lot of people at Iowa since she took over officially on August 2nd as interim AD, and even before that, in her almost a year as deputy AD.
He is John Steppe, beat writer for Iowa Hawkeye Athletics for the Gazette.com, Cedar Rapids Gazette. I'm Dave O'Hara at Hawkeye. We'll be back with more to close out the show in a few moments.
Who do you trust to produce the best yield? A seed company that's chasing technology or a seed company that's writing a book on it? Merschman Seeds is a leader in technology. We're independent and family owned. Our sister company, MS Technologies, provides access to world-class traits and genetics. And our starting line seed treatment is second to none. Who can you trust with your yields? Merschman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. You can see our buddy John Steppe joining us for the whole show. And thanks again to John so much for doing that. A busy guy as you check out his work. Let's talk women's basketball and Blue Bunch first, and then we'll go and talk about the men's basketball program and Fran McCaffrey. Please, John.
Yeah, so this kind of is a disclaimer, first of all, as we're talking about the foreign tours that applies for both women's basketball and men's basketball, that the competition that they're seeing on these tours are usually not, particularly on the women's basketball tour. This is not LSU women's basketball level of talent that they're going up against, but it's still a really crucial development time and a chance to see some players. Of course, we didn't see because they weren't live streamed or televised anywhere, but a chance for players like Addison O'Grady to really get a chance to develop more. Now she's me more in the spotlight without Monica Sonano. So really a great developmental opportunity. It sounds like they had a lot of fun also outside of the basketball games. Italy, Croatia. For some reason, the Gazette did not want to pay for me to travel to those games.
Why?
I cannot
Why?
personally picture why.
But October 15th, Kinnick Stadium against DePaul University, this could be something that continues to put the Hawkeye women's basketball program on the map. If last year and Caitlin Clark repeatedly hasn't done that enough, oh, by the way, here we go. Plus the regular season, or the season is sold out at Carver Hawkeye Arena. But, John, it's a heck of a leap to go from 15,000 fans to potentially 50,000 plus, and darn near, at least Phil Kinnick, not maybe full to the 70,000 capacity, but darn close. This is going to be something else. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, obviously.
Yeah, it's really a unique thing where I think they're in the 30,000s right away on the first day of the general sale, which when you think about that, that's just incredible in terms of for an exhibition. And you're seeing, when you look at the ticket map, you're seeing people who are buying tickets that are practically on like the opposing 15-yard line when they're putting the court toward an end zone. So that really is impressive. So kudos to Iowa women's basketball fans. You have impressed me yet again. And I think it's going to be something really historic. And it's easy to, in kind of the day-to-day, to not really see the historical value of this. But you think about how big of a deal it was in, I think it was 1985 when they got 21,000 and something fans crammed into Carver Hawkeye Arena for that game against Ohio State. That was really special, where the opposing coach still remembers the exact attendance number. That was how special that was in 1985. And now you're seeing a chance, as long as weather permits, to break that record. And based on the tickets sold, as long as that weather cooperates, knock on wood, as long as that weather cooperates, this will be the new record setter here. So it's a big deal for women's basketball. Obviously, in terms of the on-court aspect of it, you just kind of cross your fingers for no injuries when you're playing an outdoor game in October. I got one question pretty early on. Oh, why only an exhibition? Well, when you get into regular season play, you're not going to want to play Indiana outside in February. So you've got some limitations there in terms of weather. This is really the time where you can do it, in terms of it being still early enough to have a good chance of decent weather. And with an exhibition, if conditions aren't great, you don't have to go through with a 4-quarter thing if it doesn't seem to be in everyone's best interest to do so. So we're really looking at history, and it's a cool thing to see for women's basketball when you hear about what things were. Even if you just look back at where things were 5 years ago, for example, really seeing an explosion in interest. And obviously Caitlin Clark is a big part of that. And now with this being her senior year, understandably a lot of fan interest.
And then new guys to college basketball, as I mentioned, with Mbele and Harding and Freeman. John, reason for extreme optimism, and it's still August yet, and I don't want to oversell this, but I think Fran's team's going to be fun again. And you talk about getting the board off the glass, or getting the ball off the glass and off the boards and getting it out and running. It's going to be another fun team to watch. It appears as though right now, John.
Yeah, the big question is replacing Chris Murray's production. That is not an easy thing to do.
By the way, we had to replace Luka Garza the year before, Keegan Murray last year, and now with Chris. You nailed it. That's going to be the question. And Joe Wieskamp being gone, Jordan Bohannon. You hit the nail on the head right there, John.
Yeah, so that's me. The big question is, can you replace that production? Do you see a guy like Peyton Sanford step up? And Iowa seems to year after year make it look easy in terms of, okay, as you're mentioning, you lose Garza and you're just fine. You lose Keegan and you're just fine. Now you lose Chris and we'll see. So Sanford, he's a guy that I think if he can really take that next step, that would be a really important thing for this Iowa basketball team. But I'm curious to see in terms of who takes that next step, because you have more opportunities with the ball for these other players, a lot of players with potential, but you really do need somebody to step up to get them to that next level. So it'll be interesting to see. got a little bit of a taste of it with the box scores from the foreign tour. But as we've been talking about, not the toughest competition at all times with that. So still got a few more months to see who exactly is early emerges those top scoring threats.
John, my friend, we'll put a pause in this until next week. Thank you so much. And as always, great job, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Truly my pleasure. For John Steppe, my production partner, Michael Merrick, and to you, the viewers and listeners, most importantly, that's all from us at Hawkeye. Thanks to all of you.
And as always, thanks for staying tuned at the end of the program for these rolling credits to give our advertisers and sponsors the attention and credit they so richly deserve. And as always, to our aforementioned guests and to you, the viewers. That's all from us at Hawkeye. Thanks to all of you.